Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Amiable Arguments. And it's my absolute singular pleasure today to introduce to you my very first guest, who I haven't actually met before this. So this is a very exciting moment for me. I've expanded beyond my drama school sphere of influence. So without further ado, Rachel, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. No, thank you for agreeing. Rachel and I are going to talk today with everyone about atheism, which is good because I think we both have a great deal to say about it. So,
Definitely, yeah.
Rachel's just quickly going to plug her Instagram for you, and then I will move on with the conversation.
Yeah, I have an Instagram sort of talking about atheism, animal liberation, all sorts, really, politics. That's at rationale, RATION.ALE.
Fantastic. And I'll leave a link in the description below for her Instagram. There we go. Plugged. Right, Rachel, without further ado, why don't you start by telling us a little bit? If we're talking about atheism, do you maybe want to tell people, are you an atheist? Or do you want to
Yeah,
spend this time criticizing it? What's your stance on all this?
yeah. I call myself an atheist. I think it's taken me a while to get to yeah, calling myself an atheist. I think I've gone through a bit of an agnostic stage, and definitely when I was younger, I would have called myself a Christian. I went to a Catholic primary school, sort of a relatively religious family, more on my mum's side. Went through a definite period of just criticizing religion, almost like anti-theist. It was a fun period, but
No prisoners.
yeah.
Okay,
So
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah, so my personal background in all of this is that I sort of conversely to you, I haven't grown up in a religious household at all.
mm,
My dad, in particular, was always very anti Christian. A lot of
yeah. My dad too. Really,
yeah, it's the dads. The dads are the atheists.
it's the dads,
the,
the influence. Yeah,
some yeah, so lots of and he wasn't exactly effing and jeffing at every priest that came by, but
yeah.
he's very closed off. He doesn't agree with it, and I can completely respect that opinion. Of course, I think it's, if anything, it's sort of the I wouldn't say the end point because obviously we don't know where else there is to go from here, but it's kind of the end point into, if we've gone from a society that's completely religious and it
Mm,
encapsulates every single aspect of our living and our being, and then to sort of get
yeah,
to, we've almost flipped completely to the other side now. So
yeah, definitely, yeah,
and I think there's a lot of people like that around in society, and obviously particularly young people. I mean, I think we both struggle to really say. I mean, even 2 generations ago, I imagine that the Church of England would actually be quite a prominent voice, both in the local community and
mm,
on the national stage. Whereas now it's almost become that sort of oh, it's just for the people who are interested. It's
yeah.
lost
And I
that.
think particularly among younger generations, it's thought of as like oh, your great aunt goes to church, and let her do her thing,
Yeah.
kind of attitude, and we just we do our thing.
Mm, exactly. So, Rachel, could you tell me a little bit more about some of your experiences in being at a Catholic school and what that was like for you? Because we had one down the road, but I never went to
Mm.
it.
Yeah, so I went because I mean it is a good school, so that's sort of the primary reason my parents sent me there. But also my granddad on my mum's side was quite a devout Catholic, and he died when I was about 2, and I think my mum felt that he would really want me to go to Catholic school, so that's where I went. It was an interesting experience. I'm quite glad I did it because it's got me to how I think now. But yeah, thinking back, there's a lot of just questionable time spent sort of in reception. I remember spending a lot of time memorizing the Hail Mary and the Our Father and all the other different prayers. We prayed 4 times a day. a lot of time spent in mass, sort of practicing masses in school to then go to church and do the mass. It's just, wow, the time wasted, I thought, was just insane. Particularly, obviously, it is a Catholic school, you sort of know what you're getting yourself into, but it is a tax paid for school. It's not, paid for by the Catholic Church.
Right.
And that amount of time spent going into religious education rather than English and maths. I can read and write, but
good job.
maybe I'll be able to even better if I didn't know the Hail Mary absolutely backwards and forwards and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point, because I was always, I think we always had, when I was at primary school, the most we used to do was just the odd prayer at assembly, so that'd be like one a day, and then obviously some of my favourite lessons, though, were always when I did religious education at sort of GCSE.
Yeah.
And we'd learn about, Catholicism, Protestantism, Islam, funnily enough, even though, sort of lumping that into a one bracket, sort of all Muslims believe this. It's like, well, there's actually Shia and Sunni and all these sorts of things, but Islam, that was a thing. And and we learned a little bit about Judaism as well. And then if we did learn anything else, it's long since faded from my senile old memory. But so that was always taught under the guise of, this is what these people believe, this is what these people believe. You were never taught that this is the truth, which I suppose is quite different to your experience.
Definitely, yeah. And all of our teachers are Catholic, and they had to. I remember my mum telling me actually that they had to prove they were practicing Catholics to get a job at the school. So we had some more devout teachers, and some. I remember my year 4 teacher she was an excellent teacher, and was very much open to questions. I remember literally just asking us stuff like, if God made everything, who made God? And she went into her explanation of how she'd rationalised that, but how other people, atheists, might answer it, and
quite a nice sort of pluralistic range of views. I think that's quite important, as long as because obviously I think we'd probably both agree that one of the most important things that anyone can learn isn't a particular subject, it's just the ability to have critical thinking.
Definitely.
And I suppose that's something that excuse me, that you can get at some particular schools more than others, depending on what the ethos of that school is. So what then? Tell me a little bit about. So did you, when you left Catholic school, did you were you a devout Catholic? Had it, if you were obviously religious going in, were you religious coming out?
Absolutely not. I think.
Oof, they didn't do a good job.
No, they did not. I think probably around the age of 8, maybe, I started particularly talking to my dad about it. And he showed me clips of Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and stuff like that. And I remember going to school and sort of telling my friends about some of these things, and they were like, "Oh my God, blasphemy! You're going to hell, Rachel." And I was like, "No, my dad told me this. It's all right." So yeah, I think by year 6, so I was 10, 11, I was really over the whole thing. I'd made up my mind. I was an atheist, and nobody could tell me any different at that point.
Yeah,
that was my almost anti-theist stage up until I was about 15, I'd say.
Right. Okay. Well, okay. So let's talk a little bit about that stage, and then we'll move on to the post 15 sort of stage, if you like. So what describe to me in glowing detail the anti-theist stage? Did you go on like a reverse crusade, sort of, going into?
That's one way of putting it. Yeah. I think because going to Catholic school, because it'd been pushed down my throat so much, I was so over it by that point that I just went completely the reverse.
Mm.
And looking back at what I said to some people, obviously I was never like horrible, but I remember talking to my Mormon friend and almost just being like, what are you on about? Are you thick or something? Like, you know, not quite to those words, but really just sort of thinking less of people when they told me that they were religious, which is obviously not the way to think at all. But that's what I'd come to because of how much it had been shoved down my throat.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting point because you obviously said that you mostly went to the Catholic school because your parents thought it's what your grandfather would have wanted. But
Yeah,
I suppose more typically, most parents would, and I can only go off just what I would call common sense on this one, but most parents would send their children to a religious school or a secular school, or parents will be inclined to send their children to a school that best reflects their moral values, and because they want their children to grow up holding the same moral values as they do, which is understandable, but also slightly I'm not sure how to. I don't want to say pointless, but you know what I mean, because like every generationally, moral values always shift. I mean, our generation has very different, and that's an entirely separate,
of course,
separate conversation. But the idea that yes, so obviously they wanted you to go in there, probably being a more hardened Catholic, and it came out completely the other way.
Yeah,
and
absolutely the other direction. Well, I think when I guess it was around. I'm not sure how old I was in year 3, but so I don't know, 7, I think. When my class were getting ready to do their first Holy Communion, my parents actually decided that they didn't want me to do it. Like my mum had sort of strayed from the church by this point. She decided it wasn't quite for her either. And the school put really a lot of pressure on my mum to get me to do my first Holy Communion because my brother had done it a few years above me as well. And I remember a lot of arguments and my mum getting quite upset about it. And looking back, I just thought that's insane that the school put that pressure on my mum to do something for me that they really shouldn't have any say in. And I think that's when my mum stopped trying to get me to go to church or have any kind of religious values.
Right.
So I'm not surprised I came out the other end, on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's a strange one because particularly when you do reading on social media and everything, you don't know how much of it is them just joking and being ironic, but a lot of people do say the thing that turned me into an atheist was reading the Bible or reading the Quran, or they'll say those sorts of things.
Yeah.
The biggest but then I was just thinking, I imagine I know where your sort of post-15 self is going to go. Not at all, because I asked her before the interview. And I think we sort of align on that. So it's been very interesting seeing how that's come about. But just, for example, I just wanted to say, particularly when I was around that age, a lot of the things that you're describing to me, I can see reflected in myself. There was an idea that those who believed in any sort of deity were less intelligent or had too simple a worldview. Or all these sorts of things. There's an amazing line. I was supposed to get it up beforehand, but I've been rushing about a little bit. But there's this is going to be just my nerdy trivia moment, so bear with me, folks. But there's a group of games very famous called Assassin's Creed, and they're absolutely wonderful because they were when they first came out, because of the actual depth of philosophical discussion that they would have in them. And one of the first protagonists of the game, Altair, who was an assassin during the Third Crusade, he acquires this artifact that leads him to enlightened truth, as it is. So at the start, he's a Muslim like all the others, and then he looks into this artifact, and it just shows him the truth as it is, but he starts writing down these journal entries of the things that it's showing him, and there's this absolutely amazing passage in it in which he says, I've been studying the older gods, from like Greece and Rome and the pagan gods and all these sorts of things, and he was saying even though they were absurd and they were wrong, at least they were sort of going, well, when you jump you return to the ground, and when you swim you float on the water, and when the wind blows and all these sorts of things, and he's defining each of these things, and he's saying, and people couldn't explain why they were, but they would find a god to link to them as some way to explain them and to better understand them. And he said at least in these they had different gods for each thing, but now we've got to a point where there is just one god and one overarching answer to everything, which he says is just such a naive idea. But he puts it far more eloquently, ironic, than I did. But I'm just paraphrasing. But still, I think it's a very, very good point, and I found it in a video game of all places. So
the best source of information.
Yeah. Yeah, see, video games are educational, folks. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Even Tetris, it's problem solving. So, So, okay, let's dive in a little bit to the post-15 phase, because I think this is where we're going to find the most meat to talk about, and this will open up all avenues of discussion. So, what happened as soon as you hit 15? Or, well, a bit after.
Yeah, I think the first sort of person I came across that opened my mind a little bit was my physics teacher, who I had from GCSE. I've had him all the way through my A-levels, and I suppose I just hadn't even comprehended before that somebody so rational and sort of intelligent as a physics teacher could be religious. It just blew my mind. And he's a Christian, and quite a serious one as well. And he talked to me a little bit about it, and at first I was just like, what are you on about? But eventually sort of, I don't know, got over myself a little bit, I guess, to actually listen to what he was saying. And I also found people like Jordan Peterson. I think he has an excellent sort of view on God and things. And he very much takes the stance of sort of working out why God has been such a prevalent idea, the human sort of natural desire for hierarchy and that kind of thing, which all very much makes sense to me. So that was one thing. And also just working out that a belief in God is such a personal thing. It's not necessarily just you believe in the Christian God or you believe in Allah or what, take your pick. But the one saying you're a Christian, two Christians don't necessarily believe in the same God, and that sort of clicked. That I just don't personally believe in what I perceive as God.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it makes me think of the progressive nature of John Locke and his essays on religious toleration and all those sorts of things, and sort of, he finally got to the point that I think is a desirable point, that we should have religious toleration, because ultimately you could put someone, as they did, on a rack for 30 days and all those sorts of things, but at the end of the day you can't force faith. You can't force someone to change through any means other than discussion what they fundamentally believe. So it's just pointless to try through anything. So your best chance isn't to put someone to the sword, it's to have that dialogue with them, and you can only have that dialogue with them if you allow these people to speak out without fear of persecution. To live
absolutely.
in. Although interestingly, he did say, "Don't mistake me when I say I want a society of religious toleration. I don't mean atheists." He was, which I was like, "Oh, John," I was like,
"Damn it!"
Ostracized again. But well, but even that's an interesting point, because his argument was that at least with every religion, you can figure out, you can read the books, and study the texts on what their moral code is, what the Ten Commandments are for them, what they would define as sin, what their moral boundaries are, and all these sorts of things. Where he says with atheism, you can't do that because there's no higher power for them
Yeah.
to call to. They're on their own morality, which I don't agree with, but I can understand why he would think
Yeah.
it. I can understand why he thought it in the time he was writing it in context. So yeah, Hitchens, and Jordan Peterson. That was because I was watching a Jordan Peterson podcast incidentally last night. With he just released one with Stephen Fry, and I thought, my gosh,
Yes, I've just watched a clip of that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to listen.
Oh, honestly, it's absolutely fantastic. You'll, I mean, just two absolutely wonderful men. I mean,
Absolutely.
Jordan Peterson's right. Stephen Fry really is a national treasure.
Yes. Oh, I could not agree more.
And he could carry that status just on his voice alone, but the fact that he has all them achievements. Anyway,
Yeah, just for reading Harry Potter, I think he gets that status.
Exactly. So, okay, so what, now that you've sort of been through this journey of discovering Peterson and a few other, what would you say your outlook is now on people of faith?
Yeah, I think I just see it as, because this belief in God is such a personal thing, that yes, I'd still call myself an atheist, definitely, but that is only because I just cannot comprehend what I think of as God, which is quite a traditional Christian view of God. But I was thinking about like I mentioned earlier, great aunts going to church, and what my great aunt might think of as her God, and that might just be praying, so something like that. It's all it's doing is externalizing your thoughts and coming to a conclusion. That's what I would call praying. And if this is so hard to articulate what I'm trying to say.
We're making good time. You've got it.
Say I have a conversation with my dad about an issue I'm having. That's me externalizing my thought, and maybe I come to a conclusion that way. And my great auntie Joan praying to God is externalizing her thought and coming to a conclusion in that way instead. So we almost have the same view, the same belief almost. But hers, she calls that God, and I call it talking to my dad. It's so difficult to explain, but do you see what I'm trying to get at?
Well, I just want to say that your dad must see that as very high praise, that he's on the same.
I know. I hope this does not go to his head.
on the same wavelength as God. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Must be a good dad. So yeah, I do see what you're. Well, I think I see what you're driving at. It's the idea that.
Yeah, I don't feel like I explained that very well. It all just came out then.
Well, no, that's fine then. Let's unpack it a little bit further until we completely get it. So you're kind of equating that it's just about finding dialogue and companionship and support. I think support is the main thing that we're getting here. It's about finding support in things that we've kind of agreed are wiser than us and have more experience than us and have better answers to problems than we do. And like say, she calls that God, you call that dad. But but obviously, I suppose the distinction I would make though is that if you spoke to your dad and have a conversation with your dad, that conversation's happening in real time, and there is you hear his words back, and there is a tangible effect. You can take that straight with you the second after you've had that conversation. The same I would, cynically say can't be said for your auntie. Although
there's of course there's always the a problem shared is a problem halved. He may not even getting the answer back is what I need to come to my conclusion. It's just the get it out of my brain, externalize it, and then I don't know, I might not even listen to what my dad has to say. But I come to the conclusion myself. I don't listen to what he says a lot really, but and then I think it is a decent comparison with my Auntie Joan listening to talking to God.
Yeah. Hi, Auntie Joan, if you're listening.
Yeah, hi, Auntie Joan.
So, okay, no, that's good. There's a particular book that I read about 4 years ago now, and it's the book wasn't even really about this. This was kind of like a more overarching step. I don't know if you've read The Strange Death of Europe by Douglas Murray.
No, I got given it for my birthday, and it's on my reading list.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. But there was an amazing chapter in it which he just dedicated to the discussion of the idea of the God-shaped hole, where he just goes through all of time and just says always had gods, always had gods, always had gods, and then he eventually gets to the part of the 19th century. And where the universities started to be really open to the idea of interrogating God, just in the same vein that one could interrogate any other idea. One could interrogate God and the Bible in a rationalist and scientific manner. And lo and behold, God struggled to stand up to the scrutiny of those things that were being prodded at him. And ever since then, as and Nietzsche famously said that God is dead, and but ever since then, we've kind of been in our pursuits to unravel God, we've actually destroyed something that can't be replaced. And I thought that was a very interesting idea, because all of a sudden, what's the all these nations, I know they've not always done what's right, but they have been. I think it would be insincere to say that they only used religion for power and they only ever did these things for power, that none of it was actually due to true conviction. I think we could both agree that very strongly due to real conviction. And so he sort of said that once he was out of the picture or declining from the picture, that's when you start to have these utopians come about, the fascists and the communists and all these sorts of things. It's like, well, heaven isn't real, so we need to make heaven on earth, and we've only got this life, so we're making it here and now. And then you led to these totalitarian sort of rulers and dictators that just completely are the story of the 20th century. And then he sort of wrapped this up by saying, so we've learnt that lesson, utopias are bad, dictators are bad, all that sort of stuff. So now what can we replace God with? And he sort of said that in the past 20 years, the idea that we've sort of come to is just human rights and human championing of human rights. But he's saying even that, and he also talks frequently about art and the idea of replacing it with art, but no one can unite around. You could never get all people to unite around one piece of art, because it's art, and that's the beauty of it. So we're a little bit, we're a bit stuck right now, finding something bigger than ourselves to commit to and to have a narrative around.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that sort of generally conservatives or more on the right wing are more inclined to religion, and more on the left wing it's more atheist. And I think I'm sort of the opposite way around. I'm quite conservative, but I'm atheist as well. And I justify that to myself as I follow the facts. I go with rationality, but that's me being slightly big-headed. So I don't have an answer to what we fill the God-shaped hole with, but
podcasts, ladies and gentlemen.
it is the filling it with human rights and stuff is yes, I think that is what's happened. But then there's people like me who's quite conservative and quite sort of anti-SJW sort of leaning, who's also atheist. So I'm oh god, I'm just a walking talking contradiction at the minute. I don't know what I'm about.
No, you're not. You're Rachel.
I'm Rachel. Yeah.
Yeah. It's but it just that particular paragraph just or chapter really opened me up to the idea of actually it's very important for I would never I'm trying to figure out how I phrase this particular point. It made me realize that actually those with religious conviction might have something that I could go my entire life trying to find and never find. And they have it, and it gives them a great deal of comfort. And I find it a little bit unfortunate in a way that I can't believe in something larger than what is here and around us. I mean, obviously that was famously what Karl Marx said, that religion is the opium of the masses. So religion had to be wiped from the Marxist ideology, and once you wipe any sort of spirituality or religion away, you're left purely with the material world, and then we know how that went. So it's I mean, what in terms of spirituality, I suppose you could say, isn't the same thing as
yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, because I think there has been a rise, I think, for just being in school and things, in like like a lot of my friends have like tarot cards and stones that they like to take to exams with them and stuff like that. And I'm going, what are you on about? This is ridiculous. And they go, oh no, I like it. I think it, it makes me feel better. And then I have to get back to thinking, oh no, right, it's a personal choice. If it makes them feel better, that's great. But I genuinely think that's gonna rise more and more. And thinking about everyone's quite into like star signs and stuff at the minute, and I think that's gonna keep increasing and getting bigger.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Shame, isn't it?
Shame, yeah.
Sorry, no shade to the star signers. I'd love to have you on the podcast, but
no, I know no. Some of my friends will come in and go, "Oh, I looked at your star sign this morning. Oh, you've got something in store today."
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
But
that's great.
But even that, it's an attempt, isn't it, to rationalise, find something bigger in ourselves, looking for meaning, direction, purpose in the cosmos, in the great universe, and trying to help that to guide you on the path that is your life. I mean, obviously, my personal criticism of them is that they're always so vague that they encapsulate everyone all the time. They're like, well, we're all 12 of them at different stages, because that's what being human is. But okay, so I just I was sort of thinking in the back of my head as we were going through this about when I made the point about John Locke, and I was wondering if you'd maybe like to just tackle him to the ground and kick his shins a little bit on this one. So as an atheist, where do you draw your moral principles from? Where do you find morality?
Yeah, and I've had this conversation many a time on Instagram, actually, and DMs when I've posted about atheism, and usually from Christians who can't comprehend when I say that it comes from like the animal instincts. So I see it as sort of the difference between good and evil, as evil being, if you take it down to the very fundamentals of pain. So pain is there it's your body telling you to stop doing whatever it is you're doing to it. And so and then you bring somebody else into that, and if say when we were chimps, say the chimp B doesn't want to hurt Chimp A because it needs an ally. When a big bear comes to try and eat them, it needs somebody on its side. And that's, I think, taking it down to those very fundamental, and then how we've developed, we're obviously very intelligent creatures. How we've developed that over time is how we've come to know good and evil. And then obviously it's just passed down through the generations, and you're taught when you're a kid that you don't go and kick your mate because it's a horrible thing to do,
Yeah, okay. So just so I understand you correctly, do you think we kind of get morality out of nature? Out of
Yeah. I think it's almost trial and error by our ancestors, really. Of
but obviously a lot of those ancestors have been guided by religious principle.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, I mean, taking it even further back to animal ancestors.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So like the very like, I just need an ally here for when the bigger animal comes and attacks me. So I don't want to be inflicting physical pain on this other chimp, because I need it to be fit and well when the bear comes to try and eat us. Kind of,
Yeah, I
so
mean
the very fundamentals.
Yeah, I mean on a personal level, I've always tried to. You get a lot of people saying nowadays that you need to respect this person and you need to respect this person, and a lot of people demanding respect. I don't want to be too spicy, but I disagree. I don't think people are entitled to respect, because I don't respect men, and I don't respect women. I respect individuals. Having said that, I do believe that everyone should be treated with a certain level of dignity, and that's not the same thing. I think I treat everyone with a level of dignity, and then once I've had the chance to obviously gauge their moral character and get to know them, then I'll start respecting them. But I can't just respect someone I've just met. I don't know anything about them.
Yeah, I was having this conversation actually the other day of whether, say, respect is on a scale of sort of 1 to 10. Does everyone start at 5 and then it decreases or increases, or does everyone start at 0 and it increases, or stays at 0? And we just, I don't know, we could not come to a conclusion on that one, but it's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, let's. What do you think the future is for atheism?
I think it'll grow to a point where, I think going back to the sort of God-shaped hole sort of premise, grow to a point where we don't know what to do. I think at the minute, because atheism is still quite a young idea, really. Us atheists, I think, are quite lucky being in this generation.
Definitely.
We still have the balance of the older generation and the sort of up and coming generations. So we get a lot of different influences, but as it moves through time, and atheism will become the sort of more primary idea. I think it will get to a point where something new or something old is sort of brought back, and religion or some kind of spirituality becomes the more primary idea again.
Yeah.
So I don't. It's a difficult one.
It is. I mean, I've kind of my own personal view is that we've more or less got to the point of secularism in law and legislation in this
law,
in this country.
Yes.
I obviously don't want to speak on behalf of our cousins across the water, but
yeah.
Yes, they're still
they're a long way off.
They are a long way off, bless them. But but I think it's how I want government to be. I want church and separation of church and state. I think that's exactly especially going off of what we've discussed previously, of faith being something intensely personal and private to a particular person. So, you know, the state shouldn't have the right to mandate and enforce that faith onto you, especially now, given the demographic and religious shifts that we've had in this country. I mean, it's a difficult one to do, because obviously I don't want to lose track of the fact that this is, in its roots, a Judean Christian country, and that is its heritage. That's what has been a part of our grand narrative, and I don't think we should. I don't think we should start pretending that it isn't.
Absolutely not. No.
But at the same time, how long can that honestly be kept up when more and more people, such as ourselves, start feeling that there's less and less meaning in all that sort of stuff?
I guess it has to be seen as our history, our yes, still to an extent a part of our culture, but not obviously not as what it was. But yeah, I think to be fair, I think secularism will, and the separation of church and state will be the primary idea as going forwards. But on a personal level, I think atheism will get to a point where people just don't know what to do with it anymore, and some kind of other spirituality will prevail.
Who knows what the future holds?
Who knows? Yes, I'm just guessing.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got about if we go for about another 10 minutes, then so just sort of any final thoughts on some of the stuff that we talked about, or anything that you've wanted to say that I've not given you the opportunity to speak about, and you're free to discuss.
Well, a lot of time on Instagram, it gets back to, I think I've done a few posts on asking my stupid questions, as I call them, sort of the very fundamentals of, what you think this is what I thought when I was about 8, of, so if God made everything, who made God? That kind of thing. Why, if an omnipotent God exists, why doesn't he stop evil? Those kind of questions. And the reason that I've had many, many answers to them in the comment sections of those posts. And the reason that I still use those questions is because Christians particularly usually go to biblical evidence, and I just can't seem to put across that biblical evidence is it's not evidence. You're using what humans have written down, they say through God, God has told them what to write down, but you're trying to prove God by telling me what God has said. But what? So that's why I use those questions a lot, to sort of prove my own atheism.
Yeah. I mean, I could never justify it. It's the one reason, because I could never answer those sorts of questions convincingly from a faith perspective. Not for other people, but to myself. I mean, there's obviously that very famous clip of Stephen Fry being interviewed by that Irish chap, and he just absolutely tears it all apart, and and all those sorts of things. But I suppose that the one they always come back to is God's plan. It's about the plan. There's a larger plan. There's a larger plan that you are not aware of, that you do not understand, and it's so there's out of a whim, and everyone should absolutely watch this. I'm just going to quickly flick through my phone so I can find the title of it. But there was a film in the early 2000s starring Rowan Atkinson, my absolute hero, as a priest in this sleepy little village, and it's got Keeping Mum. That's what it was called. It's called Keeping Mum. It's a wonderful little British comedy. It's got all those little hallmarks of British comedy that I absolutely adore. Yeah, it's Rowan Atkinson, Kristen Scott Thomas, Maggie Smith, Patrick Swayze in one of his last ever roles.
What
And
cast?
yeah, and so, some other great actresses and actors as well in there. But essentially, he has to go and give this speech at this C of E conference, explaining
Mm.
God's mysterious ways, and it it's amazingly done. And because eventually the answer he just comes to is, well, I'm mysterious, folks, deal with it. And but you don't feel like, oh, so simple man, because you see the joy it brings him, the comfort it brings him in having those
Yeah,
answers. And I'd never want to take that away from someone. I really wouldn't, because like I say, I'm sort of envious of it in a way. So
yeah. And when I post those questions, I make it very clear that these are questions not for theists who found theism themselves. It's for those who almost like me were just thrown into it,
mm,
and to just ask those questions and see what answers you come up with, and whether that changes your mind at all, or just slightly changes how you think. You know,
yeah.
just sort of breaks that. I don't want to say indoctrination. I've been trying to avoid that word, but
Ooh, buzzword. The
yeah,
well, I mean, and indoctrination doesn't obviously have to be religious, does it? It can be any ideology
no,
that's penetrated into you in such a way as to you to believe this is the defining truth. I mean, that can be true of practically anything. I mean, I'm indoctrinated to the idea that tea is the one true drink and all others are secondary and inferior. I mean, it's as simple as that, really.
absolutely.
I mean, people will be seeing my lovely little teapot on the screen right now as they're watching this. So, amazing. Well, I guess we'll keep it there then, because I feel like we've
Yeah,
gone through stuff really fast, but we've also covered a lot of ground. And honestly, Rachel, it's been an absolutely wonderful conversation to have with you. Thank you for
thank you so much for having me.
absolutely. So thank you for doing this. I will link Rachel's Instagram down below for her ration
Thank you.
dot ale rationale
Russian.ale, that's it.
rationale. I encourage everyone to go have a look at it. It's got some really wonderful, thought-provoking questions on it, as Rachel's discussed, and some not just about atheism, but a whole degree of topics, all of which I'd have been perfectly happy to discuss with her on the podcast. But Rachel chose atheism, and who am I to say no? So, Rachel, thank you for being here. If anyone would like to follow in Rachel's footsteps and do a podcast with me talking about anything and everything that they'd like to discuss, then the door is always open. You can email me in the email down below. And I also have a Facebook page and an Instagram that I've always forgot to plug until now, so I'm going to do that as well. And yeah, there's nothing else to do but say once again, Rachel, thank you for being with me.
Thank you very much.